Emily Carter balanced 3 textbooks and a half-empty water bottle as she hurried across the university courtyard. Physics class started in 5 minutes, and Professor Williams hated late arrivals almost as much as he loved impossible equations. The autumn leaves crunched under her worn sneakers while she mentally prepared for another hour of quantum mechanics that made her brain hurt. She slipped into the back row of the lecture hall just as Williams began drawing complex diagrams on the whiteboard. Around her, students opened laptops and pulled out notebooks. Emily did the same, but instead of paying attention to the lesson, she found herself sketching rocket designs in the margins of her physics notes. She'd been doing this since childhood, drawing spaceships that could travel between stars and imagining what it would be like to explore distant planets. Her roommate Maya always teased her about these drawings. "You know, NASA probably gets thousands of applications from dreamers like you," she would say. Emily knew Maya was right. She was just another average student at a state university, working part-time at the campus bookstore to pay for her engineering degree. Her grades were decent, but not outstanding. Her family had no connections in the aerospace industry. She was ordinary in every way that mattered. Williams droned on about wave functions and particle behavior, while Emily sketched a sleek spacecraft with curved wings. She imagined it could travel faster than light, visiting worlds where alien civilizations built cities among the clouds. The fantasy helped make the boring lecture tolerable. "Miss Carter, perhaps you could explain quantum entanglement to the class since you seem so fascinated by something in your notebook." Emily's face burned red as every head in the room turned toward her. She had been caught daydreaming again. Quantum entanglement is when 2 particles become connected and affect each other instantly, no matter how far apart they are." Williams raised an eyebrow. "Adequate. Though perhaps you could show the same interest in class material that you show in your artwork." The lecture continued with Emily trying to focus on the actual lesson instead of her drawings. She took notes about probability waves and measurement problems, concepts that seemed abstract and useless. What did any of this have to do with building real spaceships? When would she ever need to know about particles existing in multiple states at once? After class, Emily walked to the library to study for her materials engineering exam. The campus was peaceful in the afternoon sunlight, with students reading under trees and playing frisbee on the grass. It was the kind of normal college day that she had experienced hundreds of times before. Nothing suggested that this particular Tuesday would be different from any other. She found a quiet table on the second floor and spread out her textbooks. The engineering material was challenging but interesting. Unlike the theoretical physics, this was about building real things that solved real problems. She spent 2 hours reviewing stress calculations and material properties, occasionally glancing out the tall windows at the blue sky. That was when the light appeared. At first, Emily thought it was just an unusually bright aircraft reflecting sunlight. But the glow kept getting stronger, and other students began pointing and murmuring. She looked up from her books to see something impossible descending through the clouds above the campus. The object was massive, easily the size of several city blocks. Its surface gleamed like polished crystal, reflecting rainbow colors that hurt to look at directly. The shape was unlike any aircraft Emily had ever seen, with flowing curves that seemed almost organic. As it came closer, she could see that it was covered with patterns of light that pulsed in complex rhythms. "What is that thing?" whispered a student at the next table. Emily stood up for a better view, her heart hammering with excitement and fear. This was obviously not human technology. The craft moved with impossible grace, making no sound as it settled slowly toward the university's main quad. There were no engines visible, no jets or propellers, nothing that explained how something so large could float like a feather. Students throughout the library pressed against the windows, some taking pictures with their phones. Emily heard someone calling campus security, and in the distance she could see people running across the quad in both directions, some fleeing the area, others moving closer to get a better look. As the alien vessel touched down on the grass, Emily noticed something that made her blood freeze. Along the side of the craft, written in glowing letters 20 feet tall, were words in perfect English. ECS Emily Carter. Her name. Her full name was written on the side of an alien spaceship. That's impossible, she whispered to herself. But there it was, bright as day, her name displayed for everyone to see. Students around her began reading the text aloud, and some turned to stare at her. Word spread quickly through the library that Emily Carter was somehow connected to the alien visitors. Emily felt dizzy. This had to be a mistake or some kind of elaborate prank. There was no reason for aliens to know her name, let alone put it on their spaceship. She was nobody special, just a college student who drew rockets in her notebook and dreamed of working for NASA someday. A section of the crystal hull began to glow brighter, and then it simply dissolved, creating a doorway. A figure emerged from inside the ship, tall and graceful, wearing flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Even from the library window, Emily could see that the being was clearly not human. Campus security cars arrived with sirens, blaring, but they stopped well short of the alien craft. News helicopters appeared overhead, circling like mechanical vultures. The entire university ground to a halt as everyone tried to understand what was happening. The alien figure stood beside its ship and spoke in a voice that somehow carried clearly across the campus despite the distance. I seek the human called Emily Carter. I bring greetings from the Galactic Coalition and a message of great importance. Emily's knees nearly gave out. The alien was asking for her specifically, not just someone with her name, her personally. Every eye in the library turned toward her as students realized that she was the Emily Carter the alien wanted to meet. Her phone buzzed with text messages from friends who had heard the news. Maya sent a string of confused emojis followed by, "Is that really you?" Her parents would probably see this on the evening news. The whole world would know that Emily Carter, ordinary college student, was somehow connected to humanity's first contact with alien life. As she stared down at the impossible scene on the campus quad, Emily realized that her ordinary life had just ended forever. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The alien stood waiting patiently beside the ship bearing her name, and Emily knew she would have to go down there and find out why the galaxy knew who she was, when she barely knew herself. The alien's ship was even more impressive up close than it had been from the library window. Emily walked across the campus quad surrounded by campus security officers, news crews, and hundreds of curious students. Her legs felt shaky, and she kept expecting to wake up from the strangest dream of her life. But the crystal hull was real under her fingertips when she reached out to touch it, warm and smooth like polished glass. "Emily Carter," the alien said as she approached. Its voice had musical qualities that made her think of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Ambassador Theron of the Altarian Republic. I have traveled many light years to meet you." Theron stood, nearly 8 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly from within. His features were elegant and angular, with large silver eyes that held ancient wisdom. The robes he wore shifted color constantly, flowing from deep purple to brilliant gold to ocean blue. Despite his alien appearance, his manner was gentle and reassuring. "I think you have the wrong person," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a college student. I don't know anything about space or aliens or whatever this is about." Theron's expression was kind but puzzled. "You truly do not know? That is unexpected. Please, would you be willing to come aboard my vessel? I have much to show you, and the explanation will require privacy." Emily glanced back at the crowd of people watching every word. Reporters were shouting questions, cameras were rolling, and she could see government vehicles arriving in the distance. Whatever this was about, Theron was right that they needed privacy. "Will I be safe?" she asked. "You are the most honored human in the galaxy, Emily Carter. No harm could come to you while you are under Coalition protection." The interior of the ship was breathtaking. The walls seemed to be made of flowing liquid light, and the floors felt soft under her feet despite looking like solid crystal. Theron led her through corridors that curved and branched in impossible ways, as if the ship's geometry followed different rules than normal space. They entered a circular room with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars. Comfortable chairs grew from the floor as they approached, and soft music played from no visible source. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic to Emily's engineering-trained mind. "Please sit," Theron said. What I am about to show you may be difficult to believe. The star-filled dome above them changed, showing what looked like a massive space station surrounded by dozens of different types of spacecraft. The structure was enormous, with multiple rings rotating around a central hub. Ships of every conceivable design docked at ports along its surface. This is Haven's Rest, the capital of the Galactic Coalition, Theron explained. 47 different species work together there, sharing knowledge and resources for the betterment of all. It has been the center of galactic civilization for over 3,000 years. Emily stared at the impossible sight. How many species are out there? In the Coalition alone, 47 confirmed member species. Hundreds more exist throughout the galaxy, though many prefer isolation. Your species was unknown to us until recently. The image changed to show what looked like a university campus, but with buildings that floated in the air, and students of many different species walking between them. Some looked almost human, while others were completely alien, beings made of pure energy, creatures that looked like living crystals and things that Emily couldn't even begin to describe. This is the Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences, Theron continued. The greatest minds in the galaxy study here, pushing the boundaries of knowledge in every field imaginable. And in the main hall of this institute stands a statue. The bulbar image zoomed in on a building with soaring spires and walls covered in equations. Inside, Emily could see a large statue in the center of a circular room. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized the figure depicted in gleaming metal. The statue was of her. That's impossible, Emily whispered. The inscription reads, Emily Carter, human pioneer of instantaneous communication. Her theories revolutionized galactic civilization and ended the long silence between distant worlds. Emily felt like the room was spinning. I never did anything like that. I'm just a student. I've never even published a real scientific paper. Theron's silver eyes showed confusion. 3 of your years ago, you submitted a theoretical work to what your species calls the Journal of Speculative Physics. The paper was titled Quantum Entanglement Communication Networks, a theoretical framework for instantaneous information transfer. Do you not remember? The memory hit her like a physical blow. She had written that paper for an independent study project in her junior year. It was pure speculation, an impossible idea about using quantum mechanics to send messages instantly across any distance. Her professor had been polite but dismissive. The journal that published it was so obscure that she doubted anyone had ever read it. It was just an idea. I made most of it up. I thought it might be theoretically possible, but I never expected anyone to actually try to build something like that. Your paper reached us when our long-range monitoring stations intercepted Earth's internet transmissions, Theron explained. Our greatest scientists had struggled with instantaneous communication for millennia. They had tried every approach, explored every possibility, but always failed. Then they read your work. The dome above them showed a timeline with dates and events. Emily watched in amazement as her simple paper sparked a revolution across the galaxy. Species that had been isolated for thousands of years suddenly could communicate instantly. Wars ended when former enemies could talk to each other in real time. Scientific collaboration reached levels never before imagined. The Crystalline Collective used your theories to connect their hive minds across multiple star systems, Theron said. The nebula dancers were finally able to coordinate their vast migration fleets. The machine worlds linked their distributed consciousness into a single galaxy-spanning entity. Your work changed everything. Emily saw images of alien worlds she couldn't have imagined. Cities of living crystal, space habitats that looked like works of art, mechanical planets covered in thinking machines. All of them connected now by communication networks based on her forgotten college paper. But how is that possible? I'm not a genius. I'm barely passing half my classes. I work in the campus bookstore and live on instant noodles. I'm nobody special. Theron was quiet for a moment, studying her with those ancient silver eyes. Perhaps that is exactly why your approach succeeded where ours failed. You see, Emily Carter, Each species in the galaxy has evolved to think in certain ways. We develop patterns of thought that become deeply ingrained over millions of years of evolution. These patterns help us survive and thrive, but they also limit us. The dome showed images of different alien species working on complex scientific problems. Each approach was sophisticated and elegant, but Emily could see that they all followed similar patterns, logical, systematic, building carefully on established knowledge. Your species is different, Theron continued. Humans have only existed for a brief moment in galactic terms. Your thoughts are not constrained by eons of evolutionary programming. Where we see impossible barriers, you see interesting puzzles. Where we calculate probabilities of failure, you imagine possibilities for success. Emily thought about all the times her professors had told her that her ideas were impractical or unrealistic. All the time she had been encouraged to think more conventionally, to follow established methods instead of trusting her instincts. The greatest minds in the galaxy studied your paper for months before they understood it, Theron said. Not because it was complex. It was actually remarkably simple, but because it approached the problem from an angle none of us had ever considered. You treated quantum entanglement not as a mysterious force to be carefully studied, but as a communication tool to be practically applied. The implications began to sink in. Her throwaway idea from college had become the foundation of galactic civilization. Worlds that had never known each other existed were now trading partners. Species that had fought for millennia were cooperating on massive projects. The entire structure of galactic society had been transformed by something she had written in her dorm room. There are schools named after you on 17 worlds, Theron added. Children of species you have never heard of learn your theories as fundamental principles of science. Your name is spoken with the same reverence we reserve for the greatest pioneers in galactic history. Emily sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she had learned. Somewhere out there among the stars, she was already famous beyond her wildest dreams. While she worried about her grades and her part-time job, entire civilizations had been celebrating her achievements for years. Why are you telling me this now? She finally asked. Theron's expression grew serious, and for the first time since their meeting began, Emily saw worry in his ancient eyes. Because the galaxy needs Emily Carter again. And this time, the stakes are much higher than communication networks. The journey to Haven's Rest took 3 days, though time seemed to flow differently aboard Theron's ship. Emily spent hours staring out at the impossible beauty of hyperspace, watching colors that had no names flow past the crystal windows. Theron had given her access to the ship's database, and she used the time to learn about the galaxy she was about to enter. 47 species, each with their own worlds, cultures, and technologies. The Altarians, like Theron, were master diplomats and philosophers. The crystalline collective thought as a single vast mind spread across multiple star systems. The Metal Singers were cybernetic beings who could reshape matter with their voices. Each species was ancient beyond human comprehension, with histories stretching back millions of years, and now they all needed help from a 21-year-old college student. The situation is worse than we initially believed, Theron explained, on the final day of their journey. The Devourers have consumed 3 more systems since I left to find you. Entire civilizations, gone without trace. Emily had read about the Devourers in the database, but the clinical descriptions hadn't captured the true horror. They weren't a species in any recognizable sense. They were ancient machines, possibly older than most of the current galactic civilizations. No one knew who had built them or why. They appeared every few thousand years, consumed everything in their path, then vanished into the depths of space. What exactly do they do with the worlds they consume? Emily asked. They break down all. Matter, planets, stars, living beings, everything, into pure computational substrate. They appear to be processing some vast calculation, but we have never determined what they seek to accomplish. When they finally arrived at Haven's Rest, Emily felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. The space station was larger than most moons, with thousands of docking bays and millions of inhabitants. Ships from dozens of species moved in complex traffic patterns around the massive structure. The engineering challenges involved in building something like this made her head spin. Theron escorted her through corridors filled with beings she had only seen in the database files. A group of nebula dancers drifted past like living auroras, their bodies made of colored gas and electricity. A delegation of Crystal Collective members moved in perfect synchronization, their faceted bodies reflecting light in complex patterns. Two metal singers discussed something in harmonic frequencies that made the walls themselves vibrate with music. They all stopped to stare at Emily as she passed. "Word of your arrival has spread quickly," Theron observed. "Many have wanted to meet the legendary Emily Carter for years." The War Council meeting was held in a vast chamber at the heart of Haven's Rest. Representatives from every coalition species sat in a circle that stretched almost beyond sight. The diversity was staggering. Beings of energy, metal, crystal, living rock, and forms Emily couldn't even categorize. At the center of the circle, massive holographic displays showed the current strategic situation. The news was uniformly bad. Red markers indicated systems that had been consumed by the Devourers. Yellow zones showed areas under immediate threat. The pattern of destruction was spreading like a plague across the galaxy, and every projection showed it getting worse. Admiral Rex, the Coalition's military commander, stood at the center addressing the assembly. He was a Corvan, a species that looked like 7-foot-tall predatory birds with metallic feathers and razor-sharp talons. Despite his fearsome appearance, his voice carried the weight of deep despair. "Our latest engagement in the Vega sector resulted in complete tactical failure," Rex reported. "Devourer forces adapted to our weapons in real time. Energy weapons became ineffective within minutes. Kinetic projectiles were absorbed and converted to additional units. Our most advanced warships were dismantled and incorporated into their fleet before they could retreat." A representative from the Crystal Collective spoke with voices that harmonized perfectly. "Our predictive matrices show probability of victory at 0.0003%. The Devourer's adaptive capabilities exceed all known parameters." The Altarian Diplomatic Corps attempted communication, added Counselor Vera, Theron's colleague. "The Devourers responded by converting our messenger ship into additional processing units. They appear to have no interest in negotiation." Emily listened to report after report of failure and despair. Every species had tried their most advanced weapons, their most sophisticated strategies, their most creative approaches. Nothing worked. The Devourers adapted faster than any defense could be developed, and their numbers grew with every victory. "Perhaps," suggested a metal singer named Chorus, "it is time to consider evacuation of threatened systems. We could establish refugee colonies beyond their apparent range, and abandon billions of sentient beings." Rex's feathers bristled with indignation. "That is not an acceptable solution." Emily raised her hand tentatively. The enormous chamber fell silent as every eye, crystal, sensor, and awareness focused on her. She felt like an ant standing in front of a mountain. "I've been listening to all these reports," she said, her voice barely audible in the vast space. "And I keep noticing something. You're all trying to fight them directly." "Of course," Rex replied. "They are an invading force. Military response is the logical approach. But what if fighting them directly is the wrong approach? What if the solution isn't military at all?" A ripple of confusion went through the assembly. Representatives whispered, chirped, harmonized, and communicated in ways Emily couldn't understand. The idea that a major threat might not require a military solution seemed to be completely foreign to their thinking. Dr. Keening, an elderly scientist from the Meridian Collective, floated forward in her mobility sphere. "Please elaborate, Emily Carter. What alternative do you propose?" Emily stood up, feeling terrified but determined. "Back home, we have these things called computer viruses. They're programs that spread by tricking other programs into thinking they're legitimate software. What if we created something like that for the Devourers?" "A virus?" Rex looked skeptical. "Our cyber warfare specialists have tried digital attacks. The Devourers' systems are too alien and too well protected. No, not a regular virus. Something they would actually want to consume. Something so attractive that they would choose it over real targets." Emily walked to the center of the chamber, her mind racing as the idea developed. The database said the devourers convert everything into computational substrate. They're processing some huge calculation. What if we gave them something that looked like the ultimate prize? A signal that appeared to be the computational matrix they've been seeking all along? The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives seemed intrigued while others appeared skeptical. Emily could hear dozens of different voices analyzing her suggestion in languages she didn't understand. Dr. Keening's sphere descended, closer to Emily. The concept has theoretical merit, but creating a convincing false signal would require unprecedented cooperation between all coalition technologies. The complexity would be staggering. Complexity isn't necessarily a problem, Emily replied. Humans deal with complex systems all the time. We built a global communication network by connecting millions of separate computers that all ran different software. We made different technologies work together even when they weren't designed to be compatible. Admiral Rex's feathers settled as he considered the idea. You're suggesting we create a false galaxy? An information construct so appealing that the devourers would pursue it instead of real targets? Exactly. And while they're chasing our fake signal, their real forces would be spread out and vulnerable. We wouldn't need to fight them when they're at full strength. We could pick them off while they're distracted. Counselor Vera leaned forward with interest. The psychological aspect is intriguing. Every species tends to think in terms of direct confrontation when threatened. But humans have a history of solving conflicts through misdirection and creative thinking. Emily felt a surge of confidence as she saw the assembled representatives beginning to understand her proposal. It's not about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about understanding what the enemy wants and giving them something that looks like it, but actually helps us instead. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. Technical specialists from every species examined the feasibility of creating a false computational matrix. The challenges were enormous. They would need to coordinate quantum processors, energy manipulation systems, matter converters, and technologies that Emily couldn't even pronounce. But as the debate continued, something remarkable happened. Species that had never worked closely together began finding ways their technologies could complement each other. The Crystal Collective's processing power could provide the base framework. The Nebula Dancer's energy manipulation could make it seem realistic. The Metal Singers could create adaptive elements that would evolve to become more attractive over time. This is unprecedented, Dr. Keening observed. Never before have we attempted to integrate so many different technological approaches into a single project. That's exactly why it might work, Emily replied. The Devourers have seen every individual technology you have, but they've never seen them all working together in a way that none of you ever thought to try before. As the council session ended, Emily realized that something fundamental had changed in the way the coalition was thinking about their crisis. Instead of seeing an impossible enemy that couldn't be defeated, they were beginning to see a complex puzzle that might be solved with the right combination of creativity and cooperation. For the first time since the Devourer crisis began, the representatives of the Galactic Coalition had hope. And it had come from the mind of an ordinary human who refused to accept that any problem was truly impossible to solve. Work began immediately after the council approved Emily's proposal. She found herself at the center of the most ambitious engineering project in galactic history, coordinating efforts between species that had never collaborated so closely before. The challenge was staggering. They needed to create a false galaxy so convincing that ancient machine intelligences would abandon their current targets to pursue it. Emily's first obstacle was communication itself. Each species had different ways of sharing technical information. The Crystal Collective thought in mathematical harmonies that had to be translated into visual patterns for other species to understand. The Metal Singers expressed engineering concepts through complex musical arrangements. The Nebula Dancers used color-shifting displays that conveyed meaning through subtle shifts in electromagnetic frequency. This is why such cooperation has never been attempted before, explained Dr. Keening during one of their planning sessions. The coordination overhead becomes exponentially complex as more species participate. But Emily saw the communication challenge differently. At her university, she had worked on group projects where students used different software, different operating systems, and different ways of organizing information. The solution wasn't to make everyone use the same system. It was to find ways to translate between different systems. "We need a universal interface," Emily told the assembled technical team. "Something that can take information from any species and convert it into formats that others can understand." The breakthrough came when Harmony, one of the metal singers, created a translation protocol based on musical mathematics. Sound frequencies could be converted into light patterns for visual species, mathematical relationships for logical species, and harmonic resonances for energy-based beings. Within days, they had a working system that allowed real-time collaboration between radically different forms of intelligence. The technical challenges were equally daunting. The false signal needed to convince the Devourers that they had found a galaxy-sized computational matrix of unimaginable complexity. This meant creating data streams that appeared to contain the processing power of trillions of stars' worth of matter, converted to computational substrate. Emily spent sleepless nights studying Devourer behavioral patterns from previous encounters. The machines were incredibly sophisticated, but they followed predictable algorithms when evaluating targets. They always chose the option that offered the highest computational density. If the Coalition could create a signal that appeared to offer unlimited processing power, the Devourers would be unable to resist. "The deception must evolve," Emily explained to the engineering teams. "Static false data would be detected quickly. The signal needs to become more appealing over time, like it's growing and developing. That way, the longer the Devourers pursue it, the more committed they become." Commander Zeph of the Corvin Defense Corps had been assigned as Emily's military liaison. His species had initially been skeptical of trusting galactic security to a human, but Zeph quickly became one of Emily's strongest supporters. "Your approach reminds me of hunting strategies my ancestors used," Zeph told her. "The best way to catch a dangerous predator is not to face it directly, but to make it come to you on your terms." The project required resources from across the galaxy. The Crystal Collective contributed their most powerful quantum processing cores, each one capable of calculations that strained the boundaries of physics. The Nebula Dancers provided energy manipulation technology that could make the false signal appear to generate power on stellar scales. The Altarians offered their mastery of long-range communication to ensure the signal could be detected from the edge of Devourer space. But the most crucial contribution came from an unexpected source. The archivists, an ancient species that most Coalition members barely knew existed, emerged from their hidden libraries to offer something precious: detailed records of Devourer behavior from previous incursions stretching back millions of years. "We have watched them for eons," explained Curator Vast, the archive representative. "They are not truly random. They follow patterns that repeat across cosmic time. Your plan aligns with their fundamental programming in ways you do not yet understand." Emily studied the archive data with growing excitement. The Devourers weren't just consuming matter randomly. They were searching for something specific. The pattern of their attack suggested they were trying to locate a particular type of computational matrix, something that existed in their original programming but had been lost to time. "They're looking for their home," Emily realized during a late-night session with the technical team. "These machines are trying to find their way back to whoever created them. That's what we need to simulate. Not just any computational matrix, but the specific one they've been searching for across the galaxy." This insight transformed the entire project. Instead of creating a generic attractive signal, they could craft something that matched the Devourer's deepest programming. The false galaxy wouldn't just be appealing, it would be irresistible, triggering responses that the machines couldn't override, even if they suspected deception. Working 18-hour days, Emily coordinated teams across dozens of worlds. She learned to think in multiple alien languages simultaneously, switching between harmonic mathematics, visual logic patterns, and energy frequency communications as needed. Her human brain, unburdened by millions of years of species-specific thinking patterns, proved uniquely capable of synthesizing all these different approaches. The coalition engineers initially worried about Emily's mental health under such intense pressure. Humans were known to be fragile compared to most galactic species. But instead of breaking down, Emily seemed to thrive on the complexity. Where alien minds became overwhelmed by the coordination challenges, she treated each problem as an interesting puzzle to solve. "This is remarkable," observed Dr. Keening. "Most beings become less effective as stress increases, but humans appear to become more creative under pressure. Emily is making connections between our technologies that none of us saw, even after millennia of development." The digital honeypot, as Emily had named their creation, began taking shape in the deep space construction facility that the coalition had built specifically for the project. The physical components were relatively small. The real work was in the information architecture that would broadcast the false signal across hundreds of light years. Testing phases revealed unexpected challenges. The false galaxy was almost too convincing. Several coalition species reported that their own systems wanted to investigate the signal. Emily had to build additional safeguards to prevent their own forces from being distracted by their creation. But the most difficult moment came when preliminary scans detected the first Devourer response. Long-range sensors showed enemy fleets beginning to change course, drawn by the distant signal of the digital honeypot. The plan was working, but success brought new fears. "What if we're wrong about their behavior patterns?" Admiral Rex asked, during an emergency strategy session. "What if concentrating their forces makes them stronger instead of more vulnerable?" Emily felt the weight of galactic civilization pressing down on her shoulders. Billions of lives depended on her understanding of enemy psychology being correct. If she had misjudged the Devourer's nature, her plan could make the crisis worse instead of better. "Every species in this room has survived by being cautious," Emily said, looking around the assembly. "You calculate risks. You prepare for multiple contingencies. You make decisions based on proven data. But sometimes the only way forward is to take a leap of faith based on incomplete information." She paused, thinking of all the times in human history when ordinary people had made extraordinary decisions despite overwhelming uncertainty. The Devourers are winning because they're predictable. They adapt to everything you try because you're all thinking the same way, logically, systematically, safely. But this plan works precisely because it's not safe. It's a gamble that no other species would take. As the digital honeypot went fully online and began broadcasting its irresistible signal into deep space, Emily watched the tactical displays with a mixture of hope and terror. Devourer fleets across 3 sectors had altered course, converging on the coordinates where the false galaxy appeared to exist. The trap was set. Now they would discover whether human intuition could succeed, where galactic logic had failed. The first sign that Emily's plan was working came from the outer monitoring stations. Devourer fleets that had been methodically consuming worlds along the spiral arm suddenly broke off their attacks and began moving toward empty space. Long-range scans showed dozens of machine armadas converging on the coordinates where the digital honeypot broadcast its false promises of ultimate computational power. Emily stood in the central command center of Haven's Rest, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements across half the galaxy. Red markers that had been advancing relentlessly for months were now changing direction, drawn like metal filings to a magnet. The sight should have been reassuring, but Emily felt only growing tension. "Devourer response exceeds all projections," reported Lieutenant Kira from the sensor station. 87% of known enemy forces are now moving toward the false signal. The remainder appear to be maintaining defensive positions. Admiral Rex studied the tactical displays with the focused intensity of a predator. "This is our opportunity. While their main forces are distracted, we can strike at their production facilities. But the window will be brief." The Devourers had always been mysterious about their origins and manufacturing capabilities. They appeared every few thousand years with massive fleets, consumed what they needed, then vanished into deep space. But the archive data had revealed something crucial. They needed specific rare elements to build new units, elements that could only be processed in certain types of star systems. The archive records show the locations of their manufacturing worlds, Curator Vast explained to the assembled Strike Force commanders. "These systems have been abandoned for millennia, but our scans indicate recent activity. If we can destroy their production capability while their fleets are away. Emily watched the preparations with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Her plan was working better than anyone had dared hope. But success brought its own dangers. If the Devourers realized they were being deceived before the Coalition could strike their production facilities, they would return with overwhelming force. The false galaxy signal needed constant adjustment to maintain its appeal. Emily found herself working around the clock with the technical teams, refining the data streams to make them more convincing. The Devourers were incredibly sophisticated. Their scanning technology could detect inconsistencies that would fool any biological intelligence. The signal degradation in Sector 7 is approaching critical thresholds, warned Dr. Keening. If the Devourers detect the artificial nature of that data stream, they may begin to question the entire construct. Emily rubbed her tired eyes and studied the readouts. 3 days without sleep were taking their toll, but there was no time to rest. Can we boost the quantum resonance in that sector? Make the false processing nodes seem more active? That would require redirecting power from the primary transmission array, replied Harmony, the Metal Singer engineer. The risk is significant. These were the kinds of decisions that Emily had never imagined making. Every choice could mean the difference between galactic salvation and utter catastrophe. But somehow the pressure didn't paralyze her the way it might have paralyzed others. Instead, it sharpened her focus and made her thinking clearer. Do it, she decided. If we lose that sector, we lose everything anyway. The first reports from the strike forces came in 6 hours later. Coalition fleets had found the Devourer, production facilities exactly where the archive data had predicted. The ancient worlds were honeycombed with massive manufacturing complexes, all operating at full capacity to build replacement units for the fleets pursuing Emily's false signal. Target Alpha is confirmed destroyed, came Admiral Rex's voice over the communication channel. Devourer manufacturing capability reduced by an estimated 30%. More reports followed as strike forces hit production facility after production facility. The Devourers had been building their strength for this incursion for thousands of years, but they had made a critical mistake. They had concentrated their manufacturing in systems they thought were secret and protected. Emily realized that this was another example of the difference between human and alien thinking. The Devourers were ancient and patient, planning in terms of geological timescales. They assumed their enemies would think the same way, carefully gathering intelligence over centuries before making any moves. They hadn't expected a plan conceived and executed in a matter of weeks. Devourer main fleet is still pursuing the false signal, Lieutenant Kira reported. They appear to be concentrating all available forces for a major extraction operation. On the tactical display, Emily could see the enemy fleets arranging themselves around the empty coordinates where the digital honeypot broadcast its lies. Hundreds of massive ships were positioning themselves to begin the process of converting the false galaxy into computational substrate. They had taken the bait completely, but the most crucial moment was yet to come. The Devourers would eventually discover that there was nothing at those coordinates to harvest. When that happened, they would realize they had been deceived and immediately return to their previous targets. The Coalition needed to ensure that by the time the deception was discovered, the enemy would no longer have the capability to threaten galactic civilization. Strike force reports from all sectors are positive, Admiral Rex announced. Devourer production capability has been reduced by approximately 75%, but our forces are taking heavy casualties from automated defenses. Emily felt the weight of those casualties personally. Thousands of beings were dying to execute her plan. The responsibility was almost overwhelming, but she forced herself to focus on the strategic picture. This was their only chance to break the Devourer threat permanently. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Keening discovered something in the archive data that no one had noticed before. The Devourer's manufacturing systems were all connected through a quantum communication network, similar to the one Emily had theorized in her college paper. If we can access their communication grid, we might be able to introduce a virus into their entire network, Dr. Keening explained. Not a conventional computer virus, but a logical paradox that would cause their systems to lock up trying to resolve it. Emily stared at the data streams showing Devourer network traffic. The irony was perfect. The same communication theory that had made her famous could now be used to destroy the greatest threat in galactic history. What kind of paradox would work on machine intelligences that sophisticated? She asked. Curator Vast provided the answer. According to the archive records, the Devourers are searching for their creator's homeworld. That search is their primary motivation, encoded into their deepest programming. If we could convince them that they had found it, but also that it didn't exist, the solution was elegant in its simplicity. Using the same quantum communication principles from Emily's original paper, they injected a signal into the Devourer network that appeared to be a message from their creators. The message claimed to be broadcasting from the very coordinates where the false galaxy existed, but also contained mathematical proofs that those coordinates were empty space. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer units across the galaxy began shutting down as their processors became locked in logical loops, trying to reconcile impossible information. Their entire civilization ground to a halt as individual machines dedicated all their processing power to resolving a paradox that had no solution. Enemy response has ceased in all sectors, Lieutenant Kira reported, her voice filled with amazement. Devourer fleets are going dark one by one. It's like someone turned off a switch. Emily watched the tactical displays as red markers winked out across the galaxy. The ancient threat that had terrorized civilizations for millions of years was simply stopping. The machines that had seemed unstoppable were paralyzed by a logical contradiction they couldn't process. The irony is profound, observed Curator Vast. The Devourer's greatest strength, their absolute logical consistency, became their fatal weakness when confronted with true impossibility. In the hours that followed, coalition forces moved to secure Devourer technology and ensure that the threat was truly ended. The machines hadn't been destroyed, but they were completely inactive, trapped in computational loops that could theoretically continue forever. Emily found herself standing before the same galactic council that had seemed so desperate just weeks before. But now the atmosphere was completely different. Representatives who had spoken of evacuation and retreat were discussing plans for reconstruction and expansion into previously threatened sectors. The galaxy owes an unpayable debt to Emily Carter and the human species, Ambassador Theron announced to the assembly. Once again, human insight has solved a problem that challenged our greatest minds. But Emily barely heard the speeches and celebrations. She was thinking about what this victory meant for humanity's place in the galaxy. Earth had gone from being an unknown world to being the home of the most respected problem solver in galactic civilization. The responsibilities that came with that recognition would be enormous. When she finally returned to Earth several weeks later, Emily found a world transformed by the knowledge of galactic civilization. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and that changed everything. Scientists were already working with alien colleagues on projects that would have been impossible before. Engineers were adapting galactic technologies to human needs. Artists and philosophers were grappling with the implications of a universe filled with intelligent life. Emily's old physics classroom seemed impossibly small after the vast chambers of Haven's Rest. Professor Williams greeted her return with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. The student who had daydreamed through his lectures was now the most famous human in the galaxy. "I have to ask," Williams said after class, "when you were drawing those spaceships in your notebook, did you have any idea that you were designing real ships you would eventually fly in?" Emily smiled, thinking of all the impossible things that had become reality. "I think that's the point of dreaming impossible dreams. Sometimes they turn out to be possible after all." As she walked across the familiar campus, Emily realized that her greatest achievement wasn't solving the Devourer crisis or revolutionizing galactic communication. It was proving that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they refused to accept that something was impossible. The universe was vast and ancient, filled with intelligences that had existed for millions of years, but it had never encountered anything quite like human stubbornness, combined with human creativity. That combination, Emily now understood, was humanity's gift to the galaxy, the refusal to accept limitations and the determination to find solutions where others saw only problems. Her phone buzzed with a message from the newly established Earth Coalition Liaison Office. There was already another crisis developing somewhere in the outer spiral arm, and the galactic government was requesting humanity's help in finding a solution. Emily looked up at the sky, where she now knew that 47 different species were waiting to see what impossible thing humans would accomplish next. The responsibility was daunting, but it was also thrilling. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter felt like she was exactly where she belonged, at the center of a universe full of impossible problems waiting to be solved.